Morning, my friends. This is Rick, and this is your seat at the table. We are looking at Lord of the Rings Adventure Over the Misty Mountains Cold. Okay, this is not actually part of the MERP system. I bought it at the time it came out. I saw it on the shelf, and I thought maybe it was, and I didn't really review it that well. And at the moment when I bought it, this is also, I believe, uh, number two. There's meant to be a series of these, so it's basically an adventure campaign that's set up and laid out for you. So all the nuts and bolts are here. Makes it pretty easy to run. There is a prequel because this is the second sequel to Lord of the Rings adventure game. So I don't have the first one, nor do I have the others that followed up on it. And I've never played it. I bought this for $10. I'm not sure what year this thing came out. Let's see what it says. 1993. This first Iron Crown Enterprises first edition, 1993. I don't know why. I just assumed that I never saw the first edition that came out, which is kind of odd. That's not to say that it wasn't there, and I just didn't see it as having any value at that time. Or Ivor, who owned the game store at that time, might have not got the first edition, the first installment of it, and or it sold out fast. It's hard for me to know. And then once I bought it and realized that this needed another book and I didn't have it, I just didn't go. And it wasn't really fitting any MERP lore or world building or any of that stuff. So if you played the first trilogy of Lord of the Rings adventure game, when it was hot off the presses, you've had a long wait for the next adventure. Let's hope our mother's words were right. Anticipation only makes it a good thing. All right, and it gives you a GM note. It may have been many months since your last session of role-playing. You've forgotten whose principal characters are, etc. So you stand at the beginning of the first adventure with second trilogy. You won't meet the villain who awaits the adventures in Mirkwood quite yet, but you'll see some of his nasty handiwork, and the Misty Mountains should be quite exciting enough without his presence. Gather your players and read aloud the summary below. Bad men full of thievery. To remind yourself of the adventures, daring deeds in the Bandit Keep. If you weren't able to play that adventure, give each PC 500 experience points and make sure they all know that they have a copy of a map of that the refugees used. All know they have a copy of the map of refuges used by enemies of the Necromancer, i.e. page 11. All right, here, so on and so forth. So like I said, this is missing an entire set from the first, quote, I guess, three-part adventure. And this one here, the book has 3 individual adventures in it, to my knowledge. Bad men full of theory. And it gives you the background for the adventure over the Misty Mountains Cold. Morglar, a dark elf in the service of the Dreadmaster Dol Guldur, journeyed west to Mirkwood at the order of the ring wraith named Camel. Camul. He rode across the Anduin through the river vales and plunged deep in the bowels of Misty Mountains where the goblins crawl, etc., etc. Older tales. We got a little bit of background, some of the stuff that's going on. Like I said, this is a laid out adventure. Pretty much everything you would need. As a GM, this would be ready to run. You just follow the trail of crumbs. So we got 2, scene 1, a short rest to travel east. Other players may need help in finding good reasons for their characters to accompany Galad and Rillan across the Misty Mountains. After all, it will be a very dangerous trip. Friendship alone may suffice if the players are feeling a bond to one another due to the adventures they've experienced together. Something about trusting one's life to a comrade tends to create a strong loyalty. Right? Once the PCs have decided to travel eastward, they will need to determine their route of travel, equip themselves properly. Urge the players to start planning. Right? So technically speaking, as far as we know, in the Central Misty Mountains, there's only 2 passes over it. The lower pass, which runs across right in front of the Goblin Gate and the main entrance, and the upper pass at the Hobbit and the 13 dwarves have taken. Or the 12 dwarves have taken. Let's see. GM notes. Hard path and dangers. The PCs depart from the last homely house, describe the events their farewell and terrain outside the valley. A great bear, a chatmoig, a pipe, a huge gray-pelted cat, big old cougar. GM notes: bighorn sheep, black bears, cave trolls, deer, the big gray cat, forest trolls, great elks, great wolves, gray wolves, little bears, hill troll, highland lynx, lost sander, moose, mountain goats, snow hares, snow leopards, etc., etc. A lot of little nice little additions. I mean, you could probably farm from these if you wanted to throw some stuff into one of your MERP campaigns for fauna. Chapter 3, Scene 2, Over the Hill and Underhill. Scene 2 is composed of 3 sequences. A thunder battle introduces PCs to the remains of a camp used by Morglar, and they are interrupted by their investigation in the area by a sudden thunderstorm, and then the stone giants compound the problem with the storm with boulders being tossed by giants in at play in the rough weather, and then a dry cave provides adventurers with shelter and acquaintanceship with the Nindu Nog, or petty dwarves, who live in the only accessible cave nearby. All right, which is ironic because it's implied in one of the other MERP modules, or adventure modules, that pretty much all the petty dwarves are extinct except that what's left of that little clan. But, well, I'm not certain when this was set, what timeline and stuff. But you got it all laid out for you here. All right. Said GM note: players may be reluctant to seek shelter. Perhaps they remember too clearly sticking in the lee of a hill during a storm in the down southeast debris and wake up in a barrel inhabited by terrifying undead. They may be anxious to avoid making the same mistake. It is hoped that the details of welcome light, subway's door and window, and the unintimidating silhouette will reassure the PCs that this time they won't meet enemies of their choice of shelter. All right. Our petty dwarves, which what they have in here, but what I've briefly just seen, doesn't really fit the typical meme for petty dwarves, in my opinion. But hey, everybody got their own twist. Chapter 4, Scene 3, Dungeons Deep and Caverns Old. Section 3 is composed of 5 sequences: the Ancient Stones, Hollowed Hills, Rainbow's Daughter, Swish, Smack, Whip, Crack, and Where the Sun Sails. So I'm guessing you find yourself under or dealing with the goblins, ancient stones, or i.e. ruins of something. Describes a stone with ruins, somebody's head on a wall, mounted on a wall, right? Underground entrance. Right. There's some interesting stuff in here, but for the most part, like I said, I never played it. I vaguely read through this a couple times recently. A few weeks ago, I went through it again, kind of. It's just never really hooked into me. There's some good stuff in here, but this is basically another set of a series of interconnected modules that would just, constitutes a campaign, which is great. I mean, once again, if anybody else has got some more on this, the rest of the series, and by all means you should do a video on it and enlighten us. I'd really love to see what more there is to it. If you can get a hold of a copy of it, good for you. It looks good on the shelf. Other than that, I never really had much of a use for it. Until next time, this is Rick.